to get into my case and how messed up my case is, and how I went to the Court of Appeals to fight it, but couldn't because of the legislation wording anyone that if I even appealed my case and overturned it, that I would easily be reconvicted due to my statement. But that was before Gennaro went to prison. I'm going to show you how messed up my case is and why I can't get off the registry and off of everything, because they didn't make it retroactive when they went through my state with the Romeo and Juliet bills. And how I still can't get my freedom because I'm not in custody. And if you're not in custody, you can't appeal an old case that you're not on probation or parole for. So when I was 17, in November of 1998, I met JKR, and she was 15. We started dating for a while, and 5 months later, it was April. My friend Darren and I went to go pick her and her friend up TAG, and TAG was 16. We went to pick them up, and after we picked them up, we were driving down the road, and TAG was up front by Darren, and he was driving, and I was behind Darren. JKR was next to me. Then TAG turned on the radio, turned back, and said something to JKR about being ready. Her saying, yeah, ready, and TAG started unzipping Darren's pants. JKR started unzipping my pants and gave us oral sex. And after that, everything went fine. We went, hung out, and then we took him home. We still dated for another month or two, but I was actually working down south, so I was driving back and forth and didn't see much of her. At this point, I was already dropped out of school, so it would have been my junior year that year. So anyways, we break up, and then it was like 2 months later, I turned 18, and we were broken up, and then it was like 2 months after that, there was an investigator at my apartment and asking questions about JKR. And right away, I'm like, JKR just called me like a month ago, calling me about her mom's money that I loaned from her. And I had said I just had a good job and I can make payments, and I heard her mom in the background upset, and that's not what she wanted to hear. So then JKR and I hung up. After admitting to everything, the detective tells me that JKR said that I forced her. And I was like, no. And with me knowing the truth, when we went to court, they tried to get me for force, but then dropped the charges because the two statements matched mine, that JKR had pre-planned this with TAG. So then the courts go into charging me because I had admitted that she had given me oral sex, and that they changed it from a force charge to having sexual contact with someone under the age of 16 without the use of force. So I had to take a plea bargain or plea because my statement admits that she had given me oral sex, and the courts is using the legislation wording, anyone, meaning I am anyone, who has sexual contact with someone under the age of 16. And JKR was under the age of 16, she was 15. So I'm very confused. I'm like, everything I was taught in school was, 18 and older, and nothing about teens being prosecuted at all as with teens, nonetheless as felonies. So it's illegal regardless if you're under the age of 18. If you're a teen with a teen, it's illegal and it's a misdemeanor. But it was never meant to be a felony because that legislation wording for that sex crime was written for adults, which is what the Romeo and Juliet bills are in the legislations that's taking forever to get around, and I've been waiting forever. I have everything of how the court went and how the other people's statement matched mine and how they made me take a plea bargain, an illegal plea bargain, and sentenced me to prison for 8 years. In 2006, I got out of prison, and Gennaro got out in 2007 when he beat his case for cruel and unusual punishment. When I went to prison, I appealed my case, and my appeals lawyers appealed it for illegal plea agreements. You know, that the courts are doing illegal plea agreements. Because of my statement, even if they reopen my case, I could easily be reconvicted because of my statement in any jury. And I know this just blows your flippin' mind. And I have nothing to do except what's happening and deal with it. And it's been years and years of dealing with numerous things, and it all stems from the legislation wording of anyone having child pornography, anyone who has sexual contact with someone under the age of 16, anyone who has sexual contact with someone under the age of 12. So if it's a 12-year-old with a 12-year-old, they're prosecuting them and they're on the registry and they were 12, but because of how these legislations and the courts are using the wording, they're prosecuting teens and making a business. I don't think they should be on the registry forever and being treated unfairly and damaged by how people treat me and the unfairness and people egging my cars and stuff like that, and they don't even know why I'm on the registry. I want to help get pardons for people like me who should not be on the registry. I want to get more into how I fought my appeals, thinking that if I bring it to the Court of Appeals anyways and spend the money, that they'll find out and change the laws or something. Like, how do you change these laws? How do I get my justice? How do I get my justice? It's by telling people the real information about what's going on. And us emailing and getting the national news about what's really going on, and we need to straighten these out. I deserve to have my life. My daughter deserves to have a better life of not having to be with a sex offender dad and can't be at her schools and stuff like that and take her to parks when I shouldn't even be on it. It affects so many people. These courts have affected so many teens and all their family members. They have numerous cases out there where these teens were put on illegal plea agreements and then they put on probation, and then they're easily revoked for hanging out with minors when they're a minor themselves and all their friends are minors, and revoking them and then sentencing them to prison, and there's no way that they can even get their justice. And they're registered as sex offenders. Some are supposed to be registered as sex offenders, but not all of them. And yes, teens who are violating by force deserve harsh time. I'm not saying they shouldn't get prison and felony charges. No, I'm stating the child pornography, the underage that's consensual, and if there's no proof, there needs to be proof. There was no proof of any force, and I had 2 statements that matched mine, so they dropped those cases and charged me with consensual sex. So I'm going to show you all the stuff for court and the documentations where you see the charges being changed. You're seeing what my court-appointed attorney is raising in court and everything after that. I'll read you the brief criminal complaint of the statements summed up from the private investigator in his criminal complaint. As to count 2, TAG, and states the date of birth. Let me get to that. So this really makes no sense to me. So they list TAG's date of birth and JKR's date of birth, and they don't list Darren's date of birth. And it's because Darren's actually 18 at the time of this blowjob incident. And nobody else was ever charged with anything except for me. So As to count 2, TAG told investigator that in April of 1999 she was in a vehicle with JKR, date of birth, the defendant, and a friend of the defendant named Darren. TAG stated that JKR asked her whether or not they were going to give the two boys blowjobs for giving them a ride in the vehicle. TAG stated that at that point she felt that she was going to perform this sexual act due to the fact that JKR was going to do this with the defendant in the back seat of the vehicle. The defendant's friend, Darren, was the driver and TAG was sitting in the front passenger seat. TAG stated, to the best of her knowledge, she believed that JKR had oral sex with the defendant during this particular incident, but that she did not look in the back seat to see what type of activities were taking place. Then it goes to JKR told complaint that about 2 to 3 months after they started dating, she was at the defendant's house with TAG. JKR stated that the defendant's friend, Darren, was giving TAG a ride home. JKR stated that TAG was in the front passenger seat. Darren was driving and she and the defendant were in the back seat. JKR stated that the defendant told her he wanted roadhead. JKR stated that by that roadhead, the defendant meant oral sex. JKR stated that the defendant grabbed her each side of her face and forced her head down to perform oral sex on him. Darren J. Bacon told investigator Harlan Schwartz that TAG and JKR and the defendant get a ride to Owen. TAG was in the front passenger seat and JKR, the defendant, were in the back seat. Darren stated that while he was driving on Highway 64 east of Highway DD, TAG looked back at JKR and said something like, "Now." Darren stated that at that time, TAG smiled and leaned over and unzipped his pants. Darren stated that at that point, TAG performed oral sex on him to his surprise. Darren stated that he did not know what was going on in the back seat of the vehicle. Here's another document from the investigator to the DA where he is uncertain whether there is enough for criminal charges or not on the sexual assault portion of the complaint. But the DA wants to use the legislation wording to convict me of anything she can. So I finally just got all the statements last week for the first time when we started doing our own investigating, and the stuff we found out on JKR and all the court cases that she had going on before she had done any accusations, even letters from her mom making just random writings of 2 years before, in 1998, before I even met her, that her sister would have to lock up all her stuff from her stealing her stuff and this and that, and we were able to get the stuff that I was never able to get, and what things my other lawyers should have already gotten, and even the DA, where if the investigator would have done a good investigation, that you would actually see that Geraldine is a very rebellious girl before I met her and while I met her, and she was, after we broke up, she ended up getting into a relationship with another guy, and they had gotten into doing a lot of drugs and stealing money, and where Geraldine was writing, got a court case for taking her sister's checkbook and writing a $500 check and going to court against this, and this is before any statement against me. And in her mom's writing, she's talking about how Geraldine had started stating to her sister's boyfriend's sister that 2 weeks prior to that she was admitted that she has had sexual intercourse with Robert, me in nothing of force. Nothing of force. So those people should have been spoken to even, but nothing. Just Darren and Tiffany and me and Geraldine. So this is all new. We're going to be putting this on the video. The court cases that she's got. She literally has 1, 2, 3 cases, and then they're even mentioning a prior case before that through all these telephone conversations, because she was in a foster home and stuff like that, for fighting with her dad and kicking him in the nuts, where he literally went to the ER, and he did not press charges against her. I have all these police reports of what's going on, and it's just crazy. The things I find out way later on, when lawyers were able to do this, because this is all before I went to prison and even went to court for this. So it's just so hard to believe with how messed up this case is, and how much you're going to see that all these police reports, whether from Rock County for the gun theft, and there was another Boone County from Illinois, and all these people that work for the Department of Corrections in the government, look at these police reports. I pulled over a cop. I state who owns the pistol. They're writing down the wrong information, and they can easily pull it up on their computer. And you'll see through all of these court proceedings that all these documents from people who are working for the government, and they don't know what they're doing. And they're making errors everywhere. So yeah, you're going to see Geraldine's statement, my statement, how she doesn't even say anything. She admits that 2 other people are in a vehicle, but nothing about them getting oral sex. And nothing about that it was her idea to plan it with Tiffany. And how I was the only one prosecuted, and nobody should be prosecuted. Geraldine should be prosecuted. But yeah, you go into Tiffany's statement, and Tiffany was Geraldine's friend, and it even states in there that they were once best friends. And this was months after I haven't seen Tiffany since when we dropped her off that night. Pages of a notebook, just stories of what Geraldine was doing from her mom, and where she states that Robert was always very polite to us, even went with Geraldine to visit her grandparents next door. I knew he had been in some kind of trouble before. Nothing was ever brought up before, but it goes into that how she loaned me the money, and how, this is her mom speaking, how gullible and stupid she's saying that she is. And Geraldine was in Norwood, which is a mental institution, had a bunch of tattoos. She was pregnant. She wasn't pregnant with my kid. Her mom states that she wouldn't talk to the counselor while she was at Norwood. States that, I wouldn't talk because I hate men. Well, what do you mean you hate men? Her mom says. And she's like, Robert raped me. Really, you're pregnant with some other teenager's kid, and you sit there and state that you don't like men, but yet you're pregnant by a man, and that's why you didn't want to talk to the counselor, and state that you hate men. In a 17-page report from her mom, it states just 3 weeks prior to that she literally had 10 boys over at their house. And then they had left, and then she had actually taken off down the road to go meet up with 3 of them. But yet she's pregnant. And then I go to find out, going through the transcripts of the June 27, 2001, her mom literally is stating that when we saw Dr. Christensen, like I said before, she wouldn't speak yet about what was the problem. She continued to have a really rough time emotionally after seeing him. And during the summer, it got worse. Like I said, her grades went from decent grades down to nothing. They were terrible. In the summer, she got on the Friday that she went into Norwood, which, when she's stating this, she's stating when she goes into Norwood is the time that Geraldine had stated that I raped her. And This is what her mom is stating for the timeline, which that's not true. The June 30 or July 30th, if that would be true, she ended up listening to her daughter tell her that she was raped, and then call the police on her daughter for stealing her other daughter's checkbook, and nothing about the forced rape or anything until later. And then in the 17 page, she literally writes this after she already sends her daughter to Norwood for 2 nights. And it's not until after August 5th is when she reports anything to the social services, and I don't even see anything of force yet, but a month and a half after that, JKR finally goes into Taylor County and reports it, and that's when she reports it as a force. Teresa's timeline is off, and it shows that she is a liar. And she had her daughter call me a month or so about that money that I had loaned from her. And no mom is ever going to have their daughter call their rapist. And she states that this happened on July 30th. And I have all the documents and timelines to prove everything of when she went to Norwood. She was never been able to put on the stand and tell the truth, and I would like to know the truth. As soon as those statements came up, everything should have been dropped, but everything should have been towards her for false accusations. And you know what? That's not illegal. So any woman can just go around, or any man can go around and state it, and you can prove them wrong, and they don't get in any trouble. She stated that I forced her, which brought everything up just to get me put in prison. She did not go on the stand after the 2 statements, and if she was, we should be able to ask her what really happened. You obviously got into some trouble with your new boyfriend, and you didn't want to not see him anymore, so you just blamed everything, what you and your boyfriend were doing, and using drugs and getting tattoos. It wasn't my name on. And that you blamed it all on your ex-boyfriend, which ended up being me. And that you state that you never had sex before me. That's a lie. And I can come and keep going and investigating people, and it's not looking too good. I was served court papers for rape. And when you go into court, my lawyer right away starts raising a motion to dismiss the rape charges, that we were both underage, and that in the criminal complaint, while getting a blowjob riding down the road, that the other female in the car said that her and the 2 females had pre-planned to give us boys a blowjob, which Darren was 18 and I was 17 at the time. But because I admitted it, that the legislation wording, anyone who has sexual contact with somebody under the age of 16 is a felony offense up to 20 years in prison. I was taught in school that if you were 18, you can't be with somebody under the age, not knowing that if you're both underage, that they're prosecuting teens for consensual contact with another teen. So in the transcripts, it goes into my lawyer talking about how these 2 girls had pre-planned it and that it should be dismissed. My lawyer then goes into that the 2 girls had planned it, that the 15-year-old is the one who unzipped my pants and gave me the blowjob, that she should be charged for having sexual contact with somebody under the age of 18, which is a misdemeanor charge. Not knowing, but the legislation written this way, they have been making teenagers take plea bargains, which are illegal plea agreements, and then people are put on probation. A lot of them are being revoked for little things and then getting sentenced to prison or jail time, which both of them were underage. After that first court hearing, they bring up the other case that they're trying to pin on me and try to make me take an illegal plea agreement, for a theft of a gun out of my own parents' kitchen drawer that was my uncle's. So in January of '99, I pulled over a police officer looking for help. He wanted to search my vehicle, and my girlfriend was with me, and I was still 17, she was 15. And I get a citation for a concealed weapon. They had found my uncle's .22 pistol in the logs from Rock County. I paid for that citation the same month, and because I was underage, I couldn't even pick the gun up. In the police report, it says who owns the gun, where they live, phone number, but they wrote the area code 815 instead of 715, and they never contacted my Uncle Terry. So when JKR, the 15-year-old, goes and makes a police report of me forcing her to give me a blowjob, which I didn't, they started questioning me about a gun theft. She had said that I had pulled over a cop and that I had a gun, so I didn't know, but my uncle had gone to the gun at some point to get it from the kitchen drawer with my dad, and the gun wasn't there. And they didn't ask anybody about the gun, they just reported it missing because Terry was actually going to court for some stuff that he had to, put things away like a gun and get rid of it. And after he reported it missing, I went and talked to him and I told him about what happened with the gun. And at the point then, I didn't know it was reported missing, but that same night, I have right here that Terry actually called the sheriff's department and said that my dad had gotten the gun back, and knowing where that Rock County had it. And I never knew he even called the police saying that he did that, but that's all in this report that you'll see I take a plea bargain to. An illegal plea bargain. They put me on probation for a theft that I shouldn't even have.
Here's another document that I just received last week, and it's from the DA to the detective after he files to charge me for the gun theft. And she states, "I do not understand the dates in this case. According to the reports, Terry Thomas did not think the weapon was missing until 1 or 2 months prior to June 23rd, 1999. According to the statement of Paul Peterson, he had seen Terry with the gun about 3 months prior to June 23rd, 1999. This puts the gun missing sometime between March and May of 1999. However, according to Robert's statement, he was stopped on January 2nd. How could Robert Peterson be stopped with the gun before it was missing?" And that's just a proof of they shouldn't even be trying to charge me for this.
So the next court hearing we go into on July 11th, 2000. It's a preliminary hearing. I plead not guilty to a different charge. They keep throwing different charges at me. Then we go into where the judge is telling me that I have to have and take a plea agreement by the next time I see him. The next time I go in is August 8th, 2000, and I go in to see him, and I have a plea agreement. It's an illegal plea agreement. The agreement would be that I would plead guilty to having sexual contact with somebody under the age of 18, not 16, so it would just be a misdemeanor. I wouldn't have a felony or nothing. So I go into court, and then the DA goes to my lawyer and they start talking. The DA doesn't want this deal anymore. So now the judge is not getting that plea agreement that he wanted, that he's making me take. And I go to the next court hearing, but before we go into that same day, August 8th, the plea questionnaire of the original agreement is actually filed with the courts right up here. And it says I will never be sentenced no more than 1 year in prison. And this, I guess, apparently really shouldn't have been filed there because that's not the agreement that was given to me. So then I go into the next hearing, and now they want me to take a plea bargain to a felony, illegal plea agreement. So August 25th, 2000, we go into the next plea hearing where I'm going to take an illegal plea agreement for consensual contact with somebody who did not attain the age of 16 because she was 15, which is a felony offense. and remind you, we're both minors. I take the agreement and I get put on probation. After August 25th, 2000, the next plea questionnaire waiver rights that I supposedly did is not filed with the courts. I pled guilty to a theft. I didn't plead anything to the assault. So remind you, it's not filed correctly, and I got this from the courts in 2015 from the courthouse, and realized that I still didn't even take a plea or guilty to any of this. Then I get into this probation, and I start probation, and I have my first agent, we sign new rules, and then I get a second agent a few months later, and sign new rules with him, and then I ended up buying a house at 19 years old. I'm on probation. I ask my second PO if I can have a roommate, and he lets my roommate, his girlfriend, and their 3 kids move into my house. So about a month after that, I get home. It was June 8th, and I pull in my driveway in the morning, and 2 cars pull in behind me, and my roommate was with me. And it was his agent saying, hey, I'm his agent, and he didn't have permission to move here. And I had no idea, but she locks me up and him up on a PO hold, then lets me out on June 11th and signs new rules with me. She's my new agent, and she gives me all these extra rules. Curfew, I can't even leave the county without permission, anything. You'll see the documents. So I had her for a few months. She's thinking I'm this bad person because of how they filed things in the courts. Everybody thinks I had forced it because of the complaint. So it gets into, she's my new agent, and 2 months later in August, she has a sex offender reclassification checklist done on me, asking to lower my risks. So I don't have all these rules anymore. My third PO let a 17-year-old move in my house because she had nowhere to live, and it was my roommate's girlfriend. And also signs me out of sex offender treatment. Well, all of a sudden she comes to see me on a home visit, and she brings another PO with her, and she's like, hey, this is going to be your new PO, so this is going to be my 4th PO. And I only have probation for 2 years. So now I'm seeing her. I ask her if she wants to sign new rules. She never signs rules with me. I have another agent, so at the same time I have 2 agents. And basically they're stemming off the same rules, but at this point they're just letting me do whatever because they were lenient. Then later on, 2 months before I get off of probation, the 4th PO with no rules comes and starts revocation proceedings for the high-risk rules that were signed off of me. So in revocation, my lawyer brings everything up and said this is just a big misunderstanding, and he tells me to waive my rights, that you have a court hearing already on a deferred prosecution agreement that the court has with me, and that he'll just go over revocation to the judge. This is just a big misunderstanding. I only had a little bit of time to sit on that. So then I go to court for the deferred prosecution agreement, and the judge is stating, because I revoked myself, and in his own deferred prosecution agreement with me, it states in there that if they try to revoke me, and even if I'm not ultimately revoked, the judge will do that and can do that, and that's what he was going to do anyway. So then after he revokes my deferred prosecution agreement, I now am just realizing for the first time that this felony charge, they're actually going to sentence me to prison, not jail. So I went home and I had the next hearing August of 2002. I'm now 21 years old. I go to court. My lawyer tries to raise the facts that this is all bogus, and the judge doesn't want to hear it. My original PO that gave me all these tough rules admitted that she was lenient with most of my rules. that I did not break my rules. I successfully completed probation. And if you look at these rules that they gave me in the deferred prosecution agreement rules, nobody can live a day without breaking these rules. So the judge then sentenced me to 8 years in prison. And when I go to prison and got sentenced, my lawyer said, "Robert, I'm sorry, appeal your case." So I appealed my case, and I learned a lot about appeals. First of all, it's a lot of money. I spent over $24,000 in prison. And I grew up poor. My family didn't have money. They pulled all the money out of their 401k and everything they could do to help. So anyways, I hire a lawyer, Marty Kohler and Hart out of Milwaukee, to do a file review. I'm in prison. It cost me $5,000 for a file review. They say, "Hey, we can fight for this. We can fight that the deferred prosecution given to you is not the right agreement and is illegal. But Robert, let me warn you, if we appeal your case and they reopen your charge, that I would still go back to court and have a jury trial, and that because of my statement, I would still be easily convicted due to my statement." And I'm just like, what do I do to change it? There's nothing. So all I'm thinking is, if I continue to pay that and we fight for this, that the Court of Appeals will recognize my case and read it and say that this is teens, and read the transcripts. This is consensual. And the first agreement that they offered me was also an illegal agreement. And within the agreement that they did give me, the things that they were offering me is if I completed the probation, that wasn't that they can't even offer me that either. So these people within the court systems are just doing whatever they want, because they just want convictions and putting, especially sex offenders, sex crimes, anything to do with sex crime is just crazy. And I know it is. And there's a lot of people who've been hurt because of this. And I'm for women, I'm for men, I'm for freedom and justice. My lawyer is like, "Okay, you can't do this agreement because, A, you can't hold a guilty plea over somebody's head while putting them on probation for a theft. And there's 3 limits you can do when you accept a guilty plea, and that was sentence them within 30 days, or if somebody's going to testify in another trial, which I was not, or if you put me on probation for that." And they didn't. They put me on probation for a different one. They only correct court mistakes that are presented to them, which my lawyer then only presented the deferred prosecution agreement, which was illegal. I'm like, but this is wrong. Isn't it the legislation to be changed by the Court of Appeals then? And well, when I went to the Court of Appeals, my lawyer prematurely
bypassed the Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court, but they filed something before something else was supposed to be filed. So my lawyers then notified me stating that for us to proceed, that I would have to pay them more money and that we had to start all over again. That it already took me 3 years to get to the point where I already was, and I had no more money to give them. And I don't even see why I have to pay for their mess up. And this just goes to show that there are so many people overcharging and taking advantage, and they don't have the passion for what they're getting paid to do.
A lot of this you can see laid out on my website, and all the stuff is all right there, and you can read more of what I've been going through before, during, and after prison, and you'll see what I'm going to continue to keep doing as it continues to grow, and we're going to make change together. And I'm using my story to do it, because nobody's listening, but this is important, and it's unbelievable. The people within the Department of Corrections are taking advantage of people. So in my case, 2017, Romeo and Juliet bills came out, and they stated, and my statutes are on there, but they didn't make it retroactive when Walker signed it in 2018. So then in 2019, June, the new bills in the legislation in Wisconsin were put in to have it retroactive for us. Well, then, because March came and that's when they do the signing, Corona came, and now the bills are just still sitting there. So I've been waiting since 2000, since before I even went to court for this. I should have never went to court for it. But anyways, Gennarlo's got out in 07 for it, and it's taking forever, and it just got here, and then it didn't make it retroactive. So back to my lawyer, my second appeals lawyer in 2014 to do a file review, and I haven't decided to do anything because back then, the Romeo and Juliet bills hadn't gone through, and now they still haven't gone through and signed. And for me, I have to wait for them to get reintroduced again, signed by the governor, and then I have to go and spend money to go back to court to get the felony off of me, to get off the registry, to finally have my freedom, which is going to take a long time yet. And it's taken too long already, and that's why I'm trying to stand up now, because I'm sick of waiting. I have things I could have done to even help more people.